Hello. Welcome to another one of these. I'm showing you the last shot of the advert. I'm just finishing up the piece of animation. I'll just show you what I've done so far. So you've got all the characters coming in at the very end saying, "Oh, isn't it marvellous? How wonderful, life is." The only character I've got to animate now is Bon Bon here, who just sort of pops in and then stops because I'm using reuse from other shots and then just extending it a bit, really. So what I've done to do some masking of the book, because of course we didn't have to have that in the previous shots, I'll show you what I did with Bus Stop. So let's get to a bit where he's sort of popping through. So what I needed was for him to be totally behind the book and then some of him in front of the book like that, you see, but not the whole thing. And I could have used loads and loads of cutters, but I decided to just use one and use something called a matte composite. Now, they don't come up very often, matte composites, for me, but they're quite useful because they stop a lot of a pachinko machine of cutter use. So essentially you say, right, what is the matte that I want to use as a cutter? And then, right, now I'm ready to use whatever this is as the cutter. So I've got a shape for the mask of Bus Stop, which is just this sort of weird trapezoid thing. It didn't have to be a trapezoid. It could have been a square that I then put a deformer on or whatever it was. But I just sort of pulled a shape into roughly the shape I wanted by plugging it into the composite and then sort of stretching it to where I wanted the mask to be removed. The mask, incidentally, is whatever the book is. So that's the reason why I've plugged the book into this and using it as that. And then I'm using the green part to cut away at the book as a mask. So when you get the final result, you get that. Now, it might be a bit confusing, so let me just show you again. So I'm just going to move this stuff up and make the matte composite itself a thing. There we go. So we've got the matte, we've got the mask plugged in and the book plugged in. Now, the book on its own, let me just move that along, creates a square. That's the white here. Now, if you open one of these up and you find you get this is because the background of this thumbnail is white. So you have to keep pressing this thing until you get the background that you want, basically. So I'm going to just go with grey. And it shows you a plus symbol, which is an additive. So it's saying, please use this square. If you double tap it, you get an invert, which is saying, please use the square, but only show Bus Stop within the bounds of that square, not outside of it. It's not using it to cut. It's now the outside that's cutting. And then if I double tap that, it means a negative. Now, minus means nothing at the moment, particularly, but it's used in conjunction with what we're about to use. So at the moment, I just want to say, please use this square. Now I'm going to add a mask, and at the moment it thinks, oh, add a mask, add that as well. So now you've got a square and this. I want to say that and not that bit. So I can double press that to get an invert, which is please use the mask here and do not use this bit here. So and use the rest of the world as well. So it's not quite what we want. Minus is what we want. Square with a little bit chunked out, which this is, this bit. So if I move this around using the peg, I can sort of move where that chunk is coming, but the other bit stays the same, you see. So intersect is a kind of weird thing where it's hard to sort of represent it, but it's where they dissect each other is the mask. So that bit's fine, but then only when there's a square and that chunk does it mask anything out. So I could have done an intersect and only had it there, and then the rest would be fine. So if I move that over here, that's the intersect part. You see the little stripe bit is where they both, only when they're both there does it actually mask something out. So I could have done that. And certainly if there was a lot of activity with him waving his arms around, if he had arms, if he had lots of activity beside it, and I just wanted to mask essentially where the bottom part came in, I could just move this around and do it that way. That would probably be the most sensible thing to do. However, I just, the shot's virtually done. Well, it was done when I finished doing the mask. So I knew his head only occupied this area, so I decided to go with this shape. And if I just move it in the correct position, then we get the result we want, which is a kind of, bit here. So I'm saying please have where the head goes. It's lots of different ways to approach the same problem. Now I'm just gonna make sure that that's correct, because I've been adding a few keyframes here and I shouldn't have been doing that really. Now the only reason I added a keyframe where I did there was because his body moves quite far over, and I just needed to sort of say, okay, now I want this bit. If we show it here, so I moved that over, you see, so that this part is unaffected by the mask, because I only want the mask to be where the head is overlapping the book, you see, like that. So that's what I was doing there. Anyway, this is how Matte Composites work, and then the final result actually does cut bus stop. I did a similar thing for Jollop as well. So if we look at Jollop, there's only one frame really where he's behind the book, and then the rest of the time he's in front of it. He's less. I mean, it didn't really need to happen, that Matte Composite, very, very fancily. But anyway, it's done now. So what I did for the mask is, as soon as, let me just show you, as soon as he's out of there, the mask appears. So rather than having to sort of come up with some elaborate way of saying, oh, now disable the mask that I'm doing with the cutter there, no, you just put another one in and say cancel that out. So have the mask of the book there, which is created by the book, and then as soon as he's out, pop another one on to cancel out the effects of the mask, and then we're fine. So that's how these composites can be quite useful to sort of counter things that you've already set up, because sometimes you struggle and you think, how do I actually get rid of a mask? If I put a cutter on here, how do I now get rid of it? And sometimes you can do it by just removing the drawing from existence, but in this case I want the drawing to still stay. This is the drawing, the book is the drawing. So how do I not mask something that is permanently there? You put in another one and counter it, and then have that turn off and on. So it's a bit fiddly, but that's the idea. Now, as I say, I was going to do him. The other thing that I found on something like this was that they all have a lot of controls on them, a lot of them, and it slows things down and makes things very confusing. So what I decided to do was make a kind of global, hide and show controls thing. Now, what would, if you were setting this up for a studio setup, what you would do in a perfect world, you'd assemble all the characters that possibly exist in your scene, and you get them in one scene, and then you create a master controller to turn them all off and on, and then it doesn't matter whether only some of the characters are in the scene in future shots, this button would still work. It would just only turn off and on the ones that are visible. But to create one is quite simple to do. You don't have to go inside each character and find every single little sort of what they called OGL controllers and master controllers, because this turns off both of them, you see. So what you have to do is you go into your scene, you select the select all nodes button, and then by node type search for OGL controller. Let me just do that properly. So now you have selected all the controllers in the land, and you go over to the function wizard, and it shows you all the nodes that are currently selected. They are now, you don't have to worry about them. If I select something else, these are the ones inside this little list. Now we want to create not just the OGL controllers, but we also want to add master controllers into this list as well. So what you can do, again, go here, search by node type, and this time look for master controllers, which, because they're not in alphabetical order, I have to search for. So let me just, master controller, there we go. So I'll look for those and they will all select. Doesn't matter what they're called, doesn't matter whether they've got MC in their name or not, they will all be found. And then you just add them to the selected nodes. There we go. Now, as far as I remember, I think you have to do the OGL nodes first. Because for some reason, if you put if you select master controllers and try to do this thing, it doesn't like that. So OGL controllers first, or indeed any node first, and then master controllers, you can add them sort of in post like this afterwards once you press the button. And you can see now all the master controllers are now in this list. And then what you want is a checkbox widget, and then you want enable disable node selected, and you call it whatever you want. And in my case, let me just find that node. This was the node, is it? That's not it. You have to connect this kind of node to the root of the entire scene. So this is it. And unlike any of the other controls that I've got in here, which are set to on load, so when you load the program up, they appear, but you have the option of turning them off again. This is the only one that I want to set to always, so this cannot be turned off. It doesn't matter how hard you try. We shall see how well that works. Oh, it does, okay. You can't easily turn it off. You can turn it off that way, but I'd set it to always just for an extra bit of protection. There are ways where you can turn things off. So if I select Jollop's dot, for example, and then press that, maybe it's not that. I think it has to be a master controller. Yeah. So if you select a master controller and go show hide controls like this, I'm pressing the show hide controls button, it disappears. Whereas I think it won't do that. Yeah. So that's its protection. If I sort of hide all controls by pressing the hide all controls button here, all the master controls disappear except the one I've set to always. So this really does show it all and hide it all. I've got to show. Now the problem is, because I've just pressed the hide all controls button, of course all master controls are hidden. Doesn't matter what this does, because this doesn't quite do that job. So the way I've got to sort of make them all appear again is I've got to go to the master controllers panel here, select every single master controller by holding down shift and pressing that, and then they all appear, and then I can use this, you see. And it's a lot easier than diddling around with the master controller panel and then still fighting against the OCL controller or whatever. So by having this little easy to use panel, and it wouldn't even necessarily have to be on the screen, I could actually move it. Let's do that to a slightly different locale. I'm just going to move that down. There we go. So now it's off screen. So if I wanted to hide it and just show things, you know what I mean? I don't have that in the way. So I've still got the ability to use it, but it's now not it's not interacting with anything, and I've got the ability to use it. So those are the two things that I did in sort of off camera, if you like, which I thought might be of interest to you. I've also finished the animation of the bird. So he's flapping away, and he actually got some personality in there. So that's what I did last time. Now I'm just going to animate Bonbon, and then that is all the animation done, as far as I recall. There are probably a few little fiddly bits to sort of correct and stuff, but generally speaking, this is it. So what I'm going to do now is turn everything off except Bonbon, so that I can see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to go here, off, go here, off, go here, off. Now you're wondering perhaps why I'm not doing it here. And I could do that, but I find if I do it this way, I'm not accidentally turning off a lot of things inside the groups, you see. Whereas if I do it that way, I tend to turn everything off inside the groups as well. I often find that does things I don't like. So I'm just doing it this slightly longer way because I prefer it. Colourful bird off. I can always turn them on this way, but turning them off creates undesirable results. Now, that's all I need because it's the main composite, really. Okay, that's it. So let's find Bonbon. Oh, yeah, sorry about this. Here we go. Right, and start animating him. Now, there's a slight delay, and I want to know why. That is not playing back at a comfortable rate. I do wonder what's causing that. Let's just have a look. It could be this. It could be all sorts of things. It could be that. It could be this. Let's hide that and see. Whoops. Yes, it is. Yeah. That's something to watch for sometimes. You may not see something, but a lot of calculations are going on in the background for things that you just don't see. So it's best to turn things off utterly. So I mean, to turn things off utterly, yes, you can go in here and turn things off. But I think it's the thing that was really holding it back, I think, was the retime node and doing all of that sort of stuff. So I think just by turning that off, it's done the job anyway. It's fine. Oops, what am I doing? Ugh, fingers. Right, okay. So he's coming up from behind here, kind of. There's so much action on screen that I need his controls. So there we go. Unfortunately, I see every single control. I've also got, what's going on here? Right, this adjust bonbon thing I really don't like anymore. I discovered that there were issues with the rigging and stuff like that if I use sort of a peg transformation in post. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that in here, get rid of this, and then make some adjustments. Yeah, because you can, maybe they're no different, actually. Oh, no, they are no different. Oh, we'll leave it then. Oh, okay. I thought his dot should have been underneath him, but I've actually done that deliberately. All right, fine. Okay. What do I know? I'll just turn off... Ooh, let me unlock the book. I'll just turn off those controls so they're not in the way. There we are. Now, Bonbon doesn't have his controls visible at all. Why not? They're over here, aren't they? Yeah, so is this misbehaving? If I plug that in, then they're all correct. Yeah. So this thing I just don't like at all. Let's get that in a position I like. So let me find where adjust Bonbon's peg was. No, he doesn't have one. What is das? Is there no peg at all? Okay. Well, I'll use the no animation thing to move him around. What that does is it moves it without creating a peg, and then that way I can get it in the right position. The downside now is that A, he might be a different proportion, and B, I can't see any of the rest of the characters. That's annoying. Okay. Right, let's turn them all on then. I mean, note to self, I'm not going to use this applied peg transformation thing again for this kind of work. It just doesn't yield very good results for this kind of work. Okay. Let's get him to a position that's very nice. I do need him further over because you can't see the book. So adjust Bonbon, put him there, and just move him over. Move him up a bit. It's important to do it with the no animation on, because I would have created several keys had I not got that on, and I don't want to do that because I kind of want to see where his position is throughout the entire animation, you know what I mean? Without committing to a key, and it's a lot easier to just move him around. I think that's alright. I think I need to make him a bit bigger though, so a little bit smaller. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, great. So remember to always turn on animate on, otherwise you'll be starting to move the character and not actually recording any of the frames for future work. So I now know. Oh, do you know what? I will turn them off here because life's too short, right? Doesn't really matter. Right, we're a bus stop, Jollop, mask, book. I'll leave that there. Mask. Okay, there we are. So I've got him. The reason he's not appearing, why is that? This is why it can be so confusing. What's going on? It's because the cat's comp was disappeared. There we go. Right, that's what I mean. When you're turning things off here, it can sort of have undesirable effects that you don't expect, but that'll be fine. Right. Okay. So the first frame, at the moment, he's just appearing from nothing, and I do think we need to be a little bit more clever. But you see what I mean, where that dot moving around in an odd way is because of... Oh, okay. I don't know why it's moving weird then. What's going on here? Oh, it's because of that. La 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 la. Oh, it's because it's connected to some sort of... I don't know, actually. Constant size. That might help. No. I think the pivot is wrong for it, maybe. Preserve proportions. Yeah. Oh well. La-di-da. Wait a minute. What's going on there? That's that. That's that. Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. No, that's fine. Okay. I mean, it doesn't really matter too much, luckily for this, but yeah, it's a bit odd. Anyway, never mind. It works. That's the main thing. I just need to get through this shot. So let's tuck him. Now, the reason his tail is behind the book and he isn't is because probably the tail is just a little bit further behind in Z than the body is. It's nothing clever with masking going on. So if I wanted to have his... Excuse me again. If I wanted to have his body behind it, I can just grab hold of that dot and move it in Z a few times. Yeah, there we go. Just do it so I've got controls in front. There we are. So now he's behind it, and then he's doing that. So I'm going to move him over a bit. Move that over a bit. So we get it. It's funny, isn't it? As soon as we get to here, the dot moves in relation to everything. It doesn't. Oh, I don't know. It's probably something to do with a constraint or something. It usually is. Anyway, I haven't got time to look into that now. And it's not that important. So, right. Just save that. So, now he's popping up from behind and looking very pleased with himself. There we are, great. Just gives it that extra little bit of niceness. Now, it's only got 5 frames, so I need to finish the last bit. So he's going to sort of be around here, looking quite smug, as is his wont. And his little dot there gives his... Yeah, that's quite nice. I think I'll do his whiskers later, just have them flying up a little bit, and his tail. Now I think the bend in his tail, which would be better suited to another type of curve which I've created, and I haven't really released into the world yet. But this is an old school thing. This is his tail. It's just a simple deformer with the end stitched onto the ball. That's the reason why it kind of moves on its own. And like that, there we go. Now what I'm going to do, this is a bit of a thing that I've thought of in recent years. I was teaching a friend of mine who's a stop motion animator to use this, and because it's such a long time since I've started using this, it was interesting to see what mistakes she was making. I mean, she picked it up very, very quickly, but there were a few mistakes that she kept making because it was such a new world for her. And one of the things that I noticed was when you play back a piece of animation in stop motion, normally, of course, you haven't created any further frames. They don't exist. So playing beyond the frame you're creating is impossible because it's not like CGI or 2D animation. Those frames do not exist yet. It's physical reality. You're moving things around. So this idea where you press play and then it keep going beyond the frame she's playing was frustrating because it kept playing and she didn't get into the rhythm of stopping the animation. And the other thing was, when you're normally animating, the concept is, say for example frame 23 was the last frame created, it would play back 20 frames prior or something like that, so it would start on frame 3. Well, of course that doesn't happen here. The closest thing we have to that is the short play button thing, which I'll get up here if I can. Let's see, playback, mini playback there, and it has the ability to say before and after and all of this. But the thing is about the after, it's arbitrary. If I press play here, it doesn't stop any particular place, so it means that the before suddenly could be anywhere. Let's say 10 frames, and then I press play from here. Well, that's 10 frames, please. I wonder why it wasn't working out. So 10 frames prior to the last frame landed upon, but the last frame landed upon, I know it will be the same each time. I don't want after. That would have to be at frame 20. I would get the same thing. But then if I'm clacking, doing my sort of, backwards and forwards, of course, that's changing the final frame. And it often sort of shifts over a little bit from where it was. Anyway, I found the whole thing it just doesn't quite work as well as I'd hoped. Rather than, it should be before an absolute frame rather than the frame you've picked, and then just have to be able to just press a button on here to confirm that that's the frame you played, but then that would make sense. Anyway, the way I've found that works better for me is if I just work away as usual, but I just stop where it's coming from. I can do that by selecting the frame I want to start from and hitting start here. And then it allows this little black nubbin to stop, and then I can just go back to the beginning using a hotkey, which is now here, and then I've got something which makes a lot more sense to me as I work. And then when I'm happy about the whole thing, I can just go back to frame 1 or type frame 1 here and click that, and then it goes right back to the beginning again. So that for me made more sense than the mini playback thing, which never quite feels comfy. And I don't have to use its special playback either. I can use the buttons that I'm used to using. So if I press that here, then I'm always going to, when I rewind back, start at the correct frame, which is much, much more helpful at the moment. And then after a while, when it gets a bit too long, I can change my start position again, and I have much more rigid control over it. Anyway, let's do this. So I think I'm happy with that frame. So now let's twist him round. Now I have, yeah, I was going to say, I thought I'd put a constraint in there. Now the problem is with him is that I'm running out of height for his pompous face. I can't go any further than that. So it's just left and right now. I could, if I wanted to, manually move the bits and pieces around, but I don't want to do that. What does this do? Does this... Oh, there's nothing on it. Okay. That's an overhang from something else. Right. There's not an awful lot to do here. It's just... I could rotate the head a little bit. So you got that sense of pompous pride that Bonbon is often exhibiting. Yeah. Let's have a look at that. Right, now I don't like the fact that his head is going backwards, so I don't... There we go. I'm using the arrow keys to do these micro movements because what's, you know, really what's the point in doing it with your mouse if you can, stylus if you can. Just move that down a bit. There we go. I need to start softening the movement with 2s actually. Yeah. There we are. So now do that. She's that friend of mine I'm talking about. She's working with another friend of mine who I worked on the Radiohead video with. I do need to pop in and say hello because I haven't seen them all for quite some time. Pre-pandemic, I haven't seen them all, so that'd be nice to see them again. I think that's the thing that's happened since the pandemic. A lot of businesses that I know, they were quite small. They haven't gone under or anything, but they've evolved into different forms now. So they don't often have one premises. A lot of people working from home and sort of converge in a meeting place to say hello to each other every now and again. You know, which is fine. I mean, it works very well. I'm sure it saves a ton of money, which a lot of small businesses really need. But it does prevent the popping in, which also is, especially with smaller businesses, I think is quite an important part of it. You know, I remember when I was a student, just finished, graduated, and I was starting to look for work in London. And I would just pop in semi-unannounced into businesses. I mean, I would phone first, and I would drop off my show reel and everything. I didn't get anywhere for a year. So if anybody's sort of wanting to know how long it takes to break into the industry, I didn't get in for a year. That's how long it took me. Mileage may vary. I would say that the best thing for any industry that you're trying to get into is get into the building somehow for a long period. So if it's as a cleaner or as a receptionist or as a runner and it doesn't really matter. I know of big producers, big ones, international ones that started off as cleaners. They got in because they need to be inside the building. It's so important to be inside the building. From inside the building, you can take the temperature on a lot of things. You can figure out when things are happening. It's insider knowledge that you won't get any other way. It's as basic as that. So, yeah, become a cleaner. If you want to be a multi-million pound executive producer, become a cleaner first. And don't be spiteful don't be spiteful to people anyway, but don't regard cleaners as lowest of the low on any level, because one day they may be your boss. But also, it's a nasty thing to do anyway. Why on earth would you want to do that? Right, let's have a look. So it's going up and then down, I'd say. Talking of cleaners, I've had to employ one for my grandmother, and I think that reminds me, I've got to sort that out. I've been employing one for my grandmother because she's incapable and all that sort of stuff, and I think it's very important to take pride in what you do. Doesn't matter what it is, whether you're a cleaner or an animator or whatever it is. Do the very best. I'm a bit OCD when it comes to cleaning anyway, so I'm quite particular, and she is very fussy, my grandmother. My God, if I'm dusting her stuff, I have to take a photograph of the stuff, so that I know exactly where things are going to be when I put them back. She's that fussy, and I sort of don't blame her. I'm similarly fussy, but yes, that's another story. Anyway, I'm quite particular about things anyway, because my excuse is I think I've got a very fizzy brain, which has its good points and its bad points, and I like order, because otherwise precious ideas that are whizzing around in my head get lost, or I get disrailed by something. I think it's a bit of an ADHD trait. I don't think I'm ADHD, but I share that trait. I find mess very, very difficult to cope with because of that. Contrast to two people that I'm one's my husband and the other one is a friend of mine they're both on the autism scale, and they can work in total utter mess. Just papers everywhere, everything piled high, but it doesn't bother them because they're so laser focused on the task at hand. It just doesn't factor at all. It drives me crazy. I don't like like a lot of animators have a lot of stickers around their workspace, and they have a lot of models and lovely sort of toys and stuff. I cannot have that. I have to have as clean a space around me as possible, because I find it distracting from what I'm supposed to be doing, which is I'm paying attention to what I'm doing now, not not this. Now, what's going on there? So yeah, it's quite a difference. And I was always like this when I was working on Bob. I'd have a very clean workstation, and the first thing I would do, because as an animator on that, you'd have to move around quite a lot. So you'd be on your own workstation, and then the showrunner would say, right, okay, we've got another shot lined up for you in Studio B or something. So you'd have to pack up all your stuff and then go to another workstation and work there, and see the remnants of the previous animator. There'd be apple cores, razor blades, pieces of concentrated fart around. It was just absolute bedlam, full of crap. And you'd have to sort of clean things up, and I would do it with wet wipes, and I'd have to do all of that first. I'd have to clean the console, which was probably thick with dust, clean everything, get everything ordered and organised before I started, because I just wanted to not have that as a thought every time. The work had to be done, so that was the most important thing first. Clean everything down. Get it all not sterilised, but get everything clean, and then I could start clacking away. And usually there's plenty of time for doing that anyway, because unless they say, right, the shot's ready to go now, most of the time they still have to sort of light something, or a prop would have to be sort of made, or an arm would have to be repaired, or something like that. So you know, that was always part of it. I'm going to do the tail properly in a bit. Also, because I'm talking animation, a classic thing, the animation takes longer. Anyway, yeah. So I was quite unusual. I was a very, very neat animator, which I don't think most people give a toss. I think most of the time people just get on with it and then sort of struggle against what they've got to do. I just find it really difficult to work in a very untidy environment because my mind just keeps floating there all the time. It's annoying. And it means, you know, you can find things a lot easier if you're not having to sort of fight against them all the time. I've always been neat. I like neat things. But I'm not saying for a minute that I'm superior in any way, unlike this chap. There we go. I just want him to rest. I don't want, you know, operatic animation of him fiddling around. This is what's known as a fidget now. You're bringing him to rest. So, and then, you know, if there's any kind of movement afterwards, it's a fidget. It needs to curve a bit more. There we are. There we are. Add up. There we go. Fling. Right, so I now need to get that moving. Like that. Really should have in mind kind of where I want this to go. Like that, just sort of curl it up. Let's have a look. Curl it round a bit more. As I say, this curve that I've designed, not this one, but one that I've designed, would have done a much better job of this tail than the current setup. So, you know, for Bon Bon Mark II, I would definitely use that curve. But for now, just getting us through one random fiddling little shot, I don't think that's that important. There we go. Now, because this is going to happen repeatedly, or maybe it isn't. I think this is perhaps the last shot, the last movement. Oh, we are all right, because it was me stupidly trying to animate it as I go, like a stop motion animator, by God. Because that's the great thing about 2D and CGI, is that you can do all the sort of secondary movements after you've done the main one, whereas stop motion, you've got to keep doing it as you're working. You know, I think that's one of the things that I hate about stop motion the most, is that you do have to do that kind of thing. You can't do animation in sections. You've got to sort of do the whole thing in one. But the saving grace is that, I mean, unless you're working for somewhere like Leica, that the work is so delicate it has to look absolutely pristine, a lot of stop motion can get away with quite a lot of clunk, I have to say. It was interesting. I saw a review of Flushed Away by the Nostalgia Critic, and he made a very good point, which I'd always thought. I mean, Flushed Away has a lot of good things going for it, but the thing that kind of... It's so sad that it went this way, that it's CG. There's something very unforgiving about CG, which needs a lot of extra attention, which stop motion simply doesn't need. You can get away with some quite clunky movements, and it actually looks endearing in stop motion, and it works. Whereas CGI, it really doesn't. And it was something that I discovered when I was animating a CG character for the very first time. I was trying it out, and sorry, and there were certain things that I was doing. I think, I can't get away with that, can I? I have to do it this way because CG does not like, doesn't like this. What I was able to do was animate the puppet in a stop motion way, but then I had to go into its kind of, I'm showing you here, kind of, there we are. Just show you, oh, goodness sake. Any of them gonna show up on here? Anything at all? I just want to show something very easily, please. There we go. You'd have to go into the curve graph of, Maya or whatever it was, to then, you see here you've got these kind of unusual sort of steps. This is because I'm animating it on what's known as a stepped curve. So the, or stop motion keyframes as they are here. So there's the computer isn't filling in the gaps. It's just saying, right, continue this image with no change until it gets to the next one. It doesn't show this as clearly as Maya, because Maya would show up, up. So that's absolutely how the movement would go. No change, no change, change. No change, no change, change. Whereas with CG, you really do have to kind of, you can see here the movement that I've produced. This is Bonbon's main, oh dear, his dot, basically, which moves the whole character around. And the Z-axis must be that one, because I haven't really moved it in Z at all. Once, I think I've moved it. Hence this move. But the rest of it, you can see that there is a kind of curve over the whole thing, you see, like that, and then it sort of doesn't move at all much. What you'd do is you'd animate the thing like this in CGI, and then you would go in here, turn off stop motion keyframes so it does start to join things together, and then you have to painstakingly, well, not painstakingly, you have to remove the points that you've just created and then create a curve that approximates the curve you created. It's smoothing and refining. It's like sanding down the movement, to create the smoother, more pleasant shape, the movements that CGI prefers. Whereas stop motion, you can have all these slightly wobbly movements, and it all actually looks quite nice. So that was the thing I found when working with CGI, was that it was a lot more finicky about micro movements. You notice micro movements, and when you've got something like Flushed Away, where the characters are not doing micro movements and they haven't got any motion blur as well. That was another thing, because they were trying to recreate stop motion and they hadn't really managed it very well. The technology wasn't there yet. As he mentioned, the nostalgia critic, you look a few years later and you've got the Lego movie doing a spectacularly good job of stop motion movement in CGI. I mean, I didn't know it was CGI. There you are. I was watching the Lego movie and thought, wow, how did they do this? Turns out the whole thing was CG. I had no idea. It was so absolutely authentic. Whereas with Flushed Away, you knew instantly it was CGI. I wasn't fooled for a minute. It's CGI. It's clearly CGI. And it would have been, I think, more sensible to make Flushed Away as a CG film proper, or as a stop motion film proper. In fact, it would have been so good, wouldn't it, if it was a stop motion film? It would have been an absolute classic. And the only reason Flushed Away isn't a classic, I believe, is because it's CG. There's something about it that's just like, it's not quite right. Which is a shame, because it has a lot of good things for it, particularly the villain. I think the villain is one of the best. I think it's one of the best villains that Aardman's ever done. The Toad. Really, really, really good. Campus Christmas, just absolute delight from start to finish. Um, and it's a shame that it's sort of got that taint due to it because of CGI. Anyway, never mind. But it was interesting that he picked up on those things, because there are very few things that the nostalgia critic says that I don't agree with. He's very perceptive and generous usually, despite his ranting. I think what he says is quite right, and kind in a funny kind of a way. He's not there to just be a twat. I mean, most of the time. I can see a little shimmy there, which I don't like. Don't like head shimmy. It's still happening. Just do that. I mean, he knows that it's fan service that he's providing. It's just another chance to sort of go over things, unless it's spectacularly bad and deserves it. I mean, he was reviewing a Nutcracker adaptation, which I've never seen, and thanks to him, I don't think I'll ever see it. It looked bloody terrible. But I think he said very sensible things about it. It made total sense, and I was doing that shimmy thing. It still is a bit, but I'm going to try and... Now, the problem is, you see, I can't easily... I suppose I can if I really zoom in. I can if I zoom in. The master controller is... if I use keyboard keys, it's very much... zoom dependent. One of the things that I would advocate not putting a master controller on the character's screen is that if I rotate the head, the master controller comes with it, so it means that the keyboard keys don't react in quite this way that you expect them to, which wouldn't happen on a separate display. Having said that, it is quite nice to have them on the same screen, so I don't have to have it here. The jury is out when it comes to this for me, because I still quite like the idea that everything is on the screen here, but at the same time, it does take up a lot of space. So I'm conflicted, really, by the whole thing, if I'm honest. Right, there's a wobble there. Oh, it's really annoying me. The only reason I got this wobble is because I'm talking. I wouldn't have a wobble if I wasn't talking. That's doing it again there. And I can't palm it off as a milk Carl head swaggle. Say, oh, I'm doing a milk Carl head swaggle. No, you're not. Incidentally, I find milk, even though it's very attractive, milk Carl's head swaggle, I'm finding it very annoying, because I'm finding it in so many things now. It's just, oh, for God's sake, know anything else? You notice this with every animator. I mean, there are certain signature moves that I do, and I've looked at old pieces of animation that I do, and I don't like it at all. I'm doing that thing again. There's a particular movement that's in a lot of old Cosgrove Hall things, and I don't quite know who was responsible for it, but a lot of animators copied it. It's the finger to the mouth gesture. So every character, it doesn't matter what Cosgrove Hall production it is with stop motion, and even it bled in even to the 2D department as well. But a character would think about something or have a pause, and they would always put their blinking finger to their mouth, over the top gesture, and it would happen over and over again. The other thing that they tended to do was the 2-hand up surprise. And And I can understand why they did some of these things, because the technology at the time, they were animating with no frame assist. You know, here I am clacking away and trying to see the previous frame, refining and refining. They didn't have that at all. They had frame gauges. So they had to come up with cliche, and I do mean that in the correct term, cliche movements, so that they knew they were going to get a good result. You know, they'd done this sort of pantomime acting endlessly with other characters, so they knew it was going to work by, over a certain period of frames, doing this sort of movement, doing it in this particular way, and I know that I'm going to get a good result and the shot will work. And the problem is that this technique bled out into times when they didn't need to do this anymore. So you had characters doing this, and they did have a frame assist, and they did have better technology, and suddenly people were doing this sort of these weird gestures when they really didn't need to do them. They had the option of doing all sorts of other forms of acting, and they weren't. They were just doing this strange pantomime-y stuff that anyway. What do I do that I don't like? There's a particular sort of wobble I tend to do, particularly if I've not planned the shot very well and I'm having to get out of it, and I just sort of the character ends up sort of moving a bit too much backwards and forwards. I'm not keen. Also, certainly in the older stuff, and less so in the modern stuff, I don't move the characters strongly enough, you know? The things move way too slowly. And I do think that drawn animation and this sort of stuff has actually improved the quality of my work, because it's allowed me to do faster stuff more easily. Now I'm just working on his whiskers and flinging them up a bit. A bit of that. I'm not sure whether this is going to work. Just gives him a little bit of life. One more. I mean, I've zoomed right in here. I'm not going to see half of this stuff, and there's so much else going on. I think that'll do. So that's fine. It's just, I just wanted his movement softened, that's all, and that's it. And the shot's way too short for him to need any kind of fidgeting beyond that. So with everything in, bing bong, bing bong, bing bong, bing bong, turn everything on here, there. Hopefully that is everything, and then I just go here and turn off the controls so we can see the final result. Oops, why? See, again, this thing doesn't always work. I've got, these are not turned off or on, as the case may be. That's what I mean about sort of not turning things on correctly, because matte composites don't show up in this panel for some reason. So they therefore are able to be turned off because they're part of a group, but they're not turned on because they're not part of a group. Anyway, if they were inside the group of bus stop, then it would work, but because they're not, they don't. Anyway, it's a long story. Right, let's go back to frame 1 and make that the start, and then play it. Now I'll play it back the first time, and then play it back the second time. It's actually loaded into RAM, or it should be. Give it a few more times. Come on, and there we go. I think it's fighting because there's a certain amount of work that's still being done by hiding things, because of the birds. But you get the idea. That works pretty well. Now eagle-eyed of you may have noticed that when Jollop turns round, his pattern disappears. Well, I know that that doesn't happen when it comes to the render, so I'm not worried about that at all. There we go. That looks pretty good to me. So now it's on to backgrounds and stuff like that. Thanks very much for following along with me today, and I'm just going to do some backgrounds and things, and then that's the advert finished. And then I can get on with other projects like, you know, some bits on my website and the new book and all of that stuff. So, yes, look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye-bye.